All right, here we go. So we are live. So the title of today's discussion is Transcending Ego or Hiding Behind It. Transcending ego or hiding behind it. I want to talk about something that has been sticking out to me, especially in the Discord, is there seems to be this obsession with being able to see the ego, name the ego, say that, oh, that's just the character, say, oh, it's just the ego, oh, it's just the thoughts, oh, it's just the feelings. But where do we go from there? Does that just become another excuse, another hiding place? Oh, yeah, I can just be miserable and not know myself as the creator because the ego is doing that? Or are we actually growing? Are we actually remember who we are? Are we actually standing in the truth of who we are? So that is what we're going to talk about. Nope, let me hit live on Instagram. Cool. So let's start this off. This is not a safe space for the ego to be understood, validated, or gently walked through its feelings. This is not a safe place for the ego. I don't care that you can observe it. I don't care that you can name it. I don't care how self-aware you sound while you stay exactly where you are. Awareness that doesn't move you is just decoration, just spiritual decoration. Right? Anybody can say, oh, that's just the ego. Oh, I feel sad. Oh, it's just the ego. Right? Oh, I'm doubting myself. Oh, it's just the ego. It's just the character. Anybody can say that shit. That is lazy. But you are here to remember that even the ego is part of God. Even that is a physically focused aspect of all that there is. The goal isn't just to be able to name it. The goal is to walk in the remembrance of who you truly are. Right? Observation without authorship is still procrastination. You don't get credit for noticing the cage. You don't get credit for noticing the prison while you refuse to step out of it. If your identity still wobbles when a thought appears or a feeling flares, then you do not know who you are yet, and no amount of commentary, no amount of calling out the ego will save you. So why I want to take this in this different direction is because y'all know I read the comments. You know, I pay attention to the comments that y'all leave, whether it was in the Telegram, the Discord, and DMs. And now this is becoming a common theme. This is becoming an absolutely common theme, right? Where you can name it. You can tell me that it's the ego, but you refuse to move from there. You just stay in this constant state of commentary, right? That's the ego. It's just the character. Oh, my ego felt like this today. Okay, but when are we going to remember who we are? Will we continue to just sit here and say the character, the ego, this or that? Or will we remember the truth? Will we recognize the truth of who we are? Okay? So before we go any further, answer the only question that matters. Not who you were, not what you feel, not what the character is doing today. Who the hell are you when all of that is stripped away? Who remains when the story collapses, when the emotions lose their drama, when the ego has nothing left to say? Because until that is settled, until that right there is understood, every spiritual concept you touch will become another hiding place. When you don't know the truth of who you are, you can tell me about the ego all day. You can call out the character all day, and it does nothing. It doesn't move you. Now you just have a nice excuse to hide behind it. You still say, Alice, I've been doing everything right. But nothing's happened. I know sometimes I'm sad and feelings don't matter, but I know that that's just the ego. That's just the character. And I say, okay, well, congratulations. You can call out the character. You know the ego. Congratulations. But who the fuck are you? So as long as we're just calling this thing out and not remembering who we are, we're not getting anywhere. It's just another technique to stay hidden in the what? In the sea of lack, in the sea of doubt. We just want to be a lack sounding board still because we're not truly remembering who we are, right? So the ego, let's talk about the ego a little bit. Gotta skip forward and through. I kind of wrote this pretty quickly. All right, let's talk about the ego. Right? The ego is not a demon. It is not your enemy. It's a physically focused interface. It's a character you are using to navigate time, body, language, memory, and contrast. That is all. Okay, that is all. It was never meant to be a throne, and it's not meant to be excused. The moment my ego is screaming becomes your favorite explanation. I know some of y'all need to fucking hear this shit. The moment that my ego is screaming becomes your favorite explanation. You have crowned the character as king and called it awareness. You're not witnessing the ego, you're protecting it. You're giving it a spiritual title so it can continue running your life without being challenged. That's avoidance. That's the true spiritual bypassing right there. You can tell me all day, yeah, this is the ego, this is the ego, this is the ego. But who are you? I don't hear you say who you are. I just hear you tell me about the character and about the ego and this and that and that and this. But who the fuck are you? Who have you decided to be? So at some point, right, like I always tell y'all, a powerful place to be is where you no longer need to walk around in self-narration because your identity is actually settled in truth. So yeah, it's cool in the beginning to understand the difference between, okay, this is me, this is the I am, this is the ego, yada yada, blase blase. But until you actually sit in the truth of who you are, it's just vocabulary. You can call it out, you can observe it, you can see it, but until your identity settles in truth of who you are, you will just continue to walk around life saying, I feel powerless, but now you'll just have a fancy excuse. I feel powerless. It's just the ego though. At what point will you stop identifying with it? At what point do you truly walk in the truth of who you are? Right, this is why we did the December challenge, and this is also why in the Discord we're going back to these daily missions. Because the spiritual concepts, just trying to get things and trying to call out the ego and all this, it's pretty, it's cute, but until you're walking in the truth of who you are, it means nothing. You're just gonna still stay in the same place that you are, but now you'll be able to easily say, oh, when I feel bad or when this thought, it's the ego. But you're not truly remembering who you are. You haven't truly changed your identity. All right? So here we go. The ego doesn't need to be loud to be in control. It only needs you to keep explaining it instead of overruling it. The more eloquently you describe its patterns, the more authority you hand it. You're not free because you can name the cage. You're not free because you can name the cage. You are free when you know that you are free. You are free when you know you're free. When your identity is free. When the truth that you walk in is I am free, I am prosperity, I am love. Okay? Real transcendence doesn't sound like commentary. It sounds like finality. It doesn't narrate the fear. It outgrows it. Awareness isn't passive observation while the same stories repeat on the loop. I know this might be a little bit triggering. Awareness is the moment you stop granting relevance to what no longer deserves a vote. If you're still explaining why you feel small, you're still choosing smallness. At some point, self-awareness becomes self-betrayal. At some point, the self-awareness just becomes self-betrayal. The question isn't whether the ego is screaming, because I could care less. If you can call it, I can care less. If you can take a step back and observe the character, I could care less. Who are you? Who are you? Who do you know yourself as? The question is, why are you still listening to it? And how long do you plan to confuse delay with depth? Understanding the ego, right? We think it's just this depth. At what point is it just delay? Okay? The convenient use of ego language. At first, learning the difference between I am and ego is liberating. Very liberating. I've been there. Super liberating, right? You realize I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, I'm not my history, I'm not the story, I'm none of this. I'm not the circumstances, I just am. Beautiful. Very liberating, right? It's good, it's necessary. But then what happens? instead of disidentifying, instead of remembering the truth of who we are and allowing that to be our identity, and staying in that truth until all else is dissolved, what happens? We start outsourcing responsibility now. Now every contraction becomes, that's just my ego. Every fear becomes, oh, that's just my ego acting up. Right? Every moment you feel small becomes, well, the ego's gonna do what it does, and you say it with the shrug like you just uncovered wisdom. That's not awareness, it's permission. It's still walking in the permission. Okay? Permission to stay collapsed, permission to keep the crown off your own head. You didn't dissolve it. You gave it diplomatic immunity. Now, when we say feelings don't matter, thoughts don't matter, emotions don't matter, that is not an excuse for you to become the soundboard of lack. It's not an excuse for every day, 15 hours of the day, you are dwelling in lack, you are sad, you're upset, you are an absolute victim in your life, and then for 13 minutes, it was just the ego that whole time. Then you go right back to the identity of lack. Who are you being? It's about disidentifying with all that and remember the truth that you are much bigger, much larger, much more vast than you could have ever realized. And that is your identity. That becomes your identity. That becomes your identity, okay? So you've turned consciousness into commentary and called it maturity. Meanwhile, your life stays the same. Your posture stays the same. Your standards stay the same. And you wonder why nothing moves. Insight without embodiment is just a prettier cage. And you're decorating the bars. Insight. A bunch of information without embodiment means nothing. Means nothing. The old mind, the old patterns, they love when you just, continue to get more information because it gives you the illusion that something's changing. Getting more information gives you the illusion of progress. You feel like you're moving, but you're not. But you're not. It is embodiment. It doesn't matter how much spiritual information that you have. Until you decide that this is who I am, it means nothing. This is why even without the spiritual information, you can decide that I am everything I desire to be, and you are. But even with all the spiritual information, guess what? If you don't make the decision to change, you won't. It's about you. Right? It's about you. Here we go. And yes, this is where spirituality rots from over-explanation. Rot sets in when people learn just enough language to avoid decision. When I see the pattern replaces I choose differently. When awareness becomes a museum tour of your limitations instead of a funeral for them. Because this is what awareness is supposed to do. Awareness should be a funeral for those patterns. I see you, I don't want you. Yes, that's the ego, but that's not the truth anymore. This is who I am. This is my identity. This is who I commit to being from this point forward. It's not meant for you to continue being a victim. Continue, oh, he left. Oh, he didn't text back. Oh, same shit every other day. But now you just have a fancy decoration to put on it and say, oh, it's just ego. Do you hear me? I trust that you hear me. Right? So real awakening isn't soft, it's decisive. It doesn't pet the ego, it outgrows it. You're not here to pet the ego. You're not here to give it a nice pretty costume, put lipstick on it. You could put lipstick on a pig, it's still ugly as shit. It's still ugly as hell. You could put a dress on it, pretty words. You can call it a character, an ego, or this or that. I know my ego's just tripping. You can dress it up with all the spiritual language you want. It still doesn't serve you. It's still ugly as fuck. All right? So here is the honest question. Have you been using it to delay becoming what you already know you are? Have you been using the ego vocabulary to delay becoming who you already know you are? Next, the ego is not the problem, identification is. The ego is not the problem, identification always is, right? The ego thinking small is not the issue. The issue is that you keep agreeing with it. You say, well, of course the ego feels unworthy. No, no, no. I am love. I am love. So of course it's natural for me to feel worthy. I change the identity and everything changed underneath. Does it mean it'll change naturally? In a day, in a week, in a month? Maybe, maybe not. But just because I feel a certain way doesn't give me an excuse to continue to just, I'll just allow this and whatever the case may be. And I'm just going to keep telling this piss poor story. But now I can say it's just the ego. It's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to remember who I am. I've already said it's just the ego. No, it's still your responsibility to remember who you are. This is your life. Right? So we'll say, of course the ego feels unworthy. That's fine. But why are you still listening? At what point does awareness stop narrating and start deciding? At what point do we stop narrating this? Okay, we get it. You know it's ego. You said it 100 times. Now, at what point do you start deciding who you are? At what point is every day not another sad story? Another sob story? Another this happened? At what point will you decide who you are? I know sometimes I got to take a tougher tone with y'all. Sometimes it's a softer tone. Sometimes it's tougher. Both ways I love you. Both ways I love you. Okay. So at what point does awareness stop narrating and start deciding? At what point does I'm noticing the ego become an excuse for refusing to occupy your authority? Because here's the truth. If you truly knew who you were, I know this one might sting some of y'all. If you truly knew who you were, the ego could scream all day and it wouldn't move you. If you really knew who you were, the ego could scream and kick and bitch and complain and whine, and circumstances could do this and it wouldn't move you because you are on your throne right here in this present moment with your identity rock solid that you are God. You are all that there is, and the circumstances, the feelings, the thoughts, the doubts, they don't matter. I matter. At what point does that become your core identity? At what point does that become the core focus of your life? To alleviate the suffering, I will no longer cause myself more pain up here. Because this is what the suffering is. I refuse to continue to be the main contributor to my own pain and suffering. Because that's what we're doing. Walking around getting slapped around by the circumstances. But you know the information. You know that identity is first and foremost. You know this. It's identity first, everything else follows. You know this. So at what point in time do we stop being the main? Okay, let me say something even further. At what point in time do we stop being the only contributor in our own pain and suffering? At what point in time do we stop dragging ourselves, forgetting who we are? Getting our ass beat by circumstances that are meaningless, feelings that are meaningless, thoughts that are meaningless. But the SP did this. I don't care. At what point do you become the center of your reality? Everything you want is on the other side of that decision. Right? Here we go. Let's get into an example. Jesus Christ did not outsource his authority. The Jesus Christ example, right? So Jesus didn't transcend the ego by disowning the human experience. He inhabited it without confusion. He ate, he slept, he felt hunger, he felt grief. He experienced temptation 40 days. And yet nowhere do we see him saying, my ego is having a moment. He didn't say, well, this fear is just my ego, so let me sit with it for 12 months. He said, I and the Father are one. There's a full stop right there. I and the Father are one. Full stop, rooted in identity. He walked as a man without forgetting he was God. This is the calling to all of us. We all walk as a character. We all walk as an ego. We don't have to forget we're God, though. We don't have to forget we're the expression of God. Okay? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. The character existed. The identity did not waver. That's the difference. character existed. The ego existed, but the identity didn't waver. Jesus Christ didn't outsource his authority to filling circumstances or inner commentary. He didn't pause to ask whether the fear was valid, whether the doubt needed processing, or whether the character required reassurance. He spoke from knowing. When hunger came, he didn't question his identity. When temptation appeared, he didn't therapize it. When opposition arose, he didn't shrink into explanation. He stood in the authorship. I and the Father are one. All right? This is a settled position. The other character existed, but it didn't vote. This is even what it means. I and the Father are one. But the Father is greater than I. I of myself can do nothing. But the Father does the work. The God within me does the work. Full identity. Didn't waver. First and foremost, this is what I remember that I am. Some of y'all have it fucking backwards. Some of y'all, first and foremost, you want to remember that the SP is yours. No. First and foremost, seek ye first the kingdom, and all things will be added to you. Not seek you first the fucking SP. Seek ye first the kingdom, the remembrance of who you are, and then all things will be added to you. But some of us have it so fucking backwards. I wake up and SP's on the mind. I wake up, it's my goodness. Remember who you are, and then allow everything, all of your desires are added onto you naturally as a byproduct of you remembering who you are. All of them are added to you naturally as a byproduct of you knowing who you are. You are all that there is. Stop forgetting. Stop forgetting. So here we go. Here is the part that is typically avoided. If Jesus waited, here we go. If Jesus waited until the human experience felt aligned before walking in authority, nothing would have happened. I would, bring Lazarus back from the dead, but I don't feel good right now. I just had a long fucking walk. I would multiply these bread and wine, but my SP, she ain't text me back. Mary Magdalene over here tripping. You know what I'm saying? I would, but I just don't feel like it today. It's not about the feelings and the thoughts. It's about your identity. Which one takes precedence? Okay? Authority didn't come after peace, clarity, or emotional regulation. It just came from recognition. He didn't transcend the world by escaping it. He transcended it by refusing to forget who he was while inside it. If your spirituality still needs conditions to stand tall, it's not Christ-like. I know. Clutch them pearls, girl. I know, right? If your spirituality still needs conditions to stand tall, it's not Christ-like. It's cautious. It's negotiated. It's unfinished. Authority doesn't arrive once the ego behaves. Authority is what causes everything else to fall back into place. Say that one more time. If your spirituality still needs conditions to stand tall, it's not Christ-like. It's cautious, it's negotiated, it's unfinished. Authority doesn't arrive once the ego behaves. Authority is what causes everything else to fall back into place. Let me bold that shit and put that at the beginning. Okay. Cool. I think we almost done. Oh yeah, we almost done. All right. So Psalm 46:10 says what? Be still and know that I am God. Notice what it does not say. It doesn't say be still and analyze your ego. It says no. It says no. Knowing is not a coping mechanism. Knowing is an identity position. Even Matthew 6:22 goes a little bit further. And if the eye is single, the whole body shall be full of light. A divided self negotiates. A unified self commands. Someone who knows who they are, they can walk through the world in the posture, in the remembrance, in the recognition that they are the expression of God. Does it mean that you're numb and you don't feel shit? No. but it means that my remembrance of the truth of who I am takes precedence over the circumstance. My remembrance of the truth of who I am takes precedence over the feeling, the thought. Do you get where I'm going? It's okay to feel. It's okay. But what takes precedence in your life? The circumstance, the feeling, the thought, or the truth? Which one? Which one? All right? The problem is not that the ego speaks. The problem is that you keep answering. All right? It's that we keep answering. So here we go. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Meister Eckhart. The mystics were not circling their pain, asking what it meant about them. Pay attention to this part. Hear this part very clearly, okay? The mystics were not circling their pain, asking what it meant about them. Right? They weren't chasing their pain down, looking through the circumstances. I just don't know why this has happened. What does this mean? What am I doing wrong? They were ruthless about one question only. Who is aware of this experience? Now, when you really start getting into mysticism and getting into all these spiritual texts, what you're going to notice is that these people that speak about I am, like, sure, manifestation is a side effect. It's a secondary thing. It's a byproduct of truth. Of course, the desires come because the desire is the truth. But if you start really studying the mystics, from Jesus to whoever the hell you want to study, Meister Eckhart, Rumi, all these greats, right? What you're going to notice is they ruthlessly pursued the one single truth, that I am the expression of God, that I and the Father are one. They weren't ruthlessly pursuing the truth that them and their SP was one. Pathetic. That's not what they were doing. The first and foremost focus was I and the Father are one. I am the expression of God. And that recognition was more important than any circumstance, any feeling, any thought, any condition, anything. This is unity consciousness. Okay? So they were ruthless about one question only. Who is aware of this experience? Once that was answered, everything else felt silent, right? So you can name and say, oh, that's the ego. This is the ego. That's just the character. That's the character. I don't care. Who are you? Who are you? Who do you recognize and remember yourself to be? That is important. Everything else downstream. Even being able to name the ego all day is another trap. It's another ego trap. It's just another technique. It's just another way for you to hide behind your limitations and say, at least I see it. But it keeps happening. Every day, same story. Every week, same story. Same limitations. You react to the same circumstances. You react to the same feelings. You react to the same thoughts. And you wonder why you suffer, and over and over and over and over again, because you refuse to go to the truth. You're so busy focused on that SP, that mid-ass SP, that average-ass SP. It's probably laying up with somebody else right now. So focused on them that you do not put yourself at the center of this journey. And that right there is the problem. That's why you still stay in the center of this journey. Because you will not put yourself in the center of this journey. All right, so here we go. So once that was answered, everything else felt silent. Stories lose oxygen when the witness is known. Wounds lose their mythology when identity is no longer assigned to them. They didn't carry their past like a resume. They stood as awareness and let the rest burn off naturally. What you're calling depth today is often just attachment to the same piss poor sob story with better vocabulary. Just because you can call lack the ego does not mean it's not lack. Let me say that again. Okay? I feel like that should have had a little bit more weight to it. Just because you can call lack the ego does not mean you're still not identifying with lack. Who are you? Who are you? You can call it out for 8 years. As long as you continue to identify with it, you're still it. The goal isn't to call this shit out. The goal is to what? Transcend it. Get to the point where you no longer need to have to self-narrate. So I'll say it one more time. I don't care how much you can call out the ego, call out the character. I don't care. If you're still identifying with lack, if you can name lack, but you're still identifying with it, you're still lack. Doesn't matter how many times you try to tell me that that's just the ego. At what point do we stop identifying with it and we identify with the truth of who we are? Okay? So here we go. You're not meant to endlessly babysit the character like it's fragile or sacred. The character is functional, not sovereign, not God. It exists to move through the world, not to define who you are. Outgrowing its authority doesn't mean erasing it. It means removing its microphone. At some point, tending to the character becomes resistance to embodiment. The longer you keep asking how the character feels about stepping into power, the longer you postpone actually stepping into it. You're not here to manage the small self forever, to call it out forever. You're here to remember who was never small to begin with. That is the purpose. That's the goal. It's to push you down this path of, get your little ass up here. Remember who the fuck you are. God damn. Get yourself from that. You don't have to be down here naming everything all day long. Who are you? Who are you, right? This is when Jesus kind of asked the disciples, right? Who do they say I am? And they started saying all these things. Some say you're John the Baptist. Some say you're this, you're that. But who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? Who do you say you are? I don't care what the ego says. You can tell me the ego says this. The ego feels this. The ego's just doing ego things. The ego feels that. But who are you? But who are you? And that is the more important question. That is the more important question. All right? Cool. So here we go. The lie of it's okay for ego to think this way. This is where people get stuck for years. For years. Well, it's okay for the ego to feel unworthy. Sure, for a moment. But how long are you planning to live there? Yeah, it's okay for the ego to feel and think whatever. Sure, for a little while. But how long are you planning to live there? Because compassion without authorship, hear this, compassion without authorship is just indulgence. You're just indulging in the old story of lack. And then acting confused when the story continues to indulge you. At some point, gentleness turns into avoidance. At some point, self-understanding becomes self-betrayal. You're not punishing the ego by refusing to stay small. You're relieving it of a job it was never meant to do. The ego screaming is not the issue. The issue is this. You keep using it as permission to delay embodiment. You keep saying, I'll step into my worth when the ego calms down. It won't. It will not. You step into your worth and the ego recalibrates after. Identity moves first, the nervous system follows. This is not therapy, that is authorship right there. Identity first and everything else follows. Okay? Everything else follows. So I want to read this first part again, and then we're going to end this one pretty early today, right? If your spirituality still needs conditions to stand tall, it's not Christ-like. It's cautious, negotiated, and unfinished. Authority doesn't arrive once the ego behaves. Authority is what causes everything else to fall back into place. All right? This is not a safe space for the ego to be understood, validated, or gently walked through its feelings. But Alex, you said treat it like your child. Sure, I sure did. Not for 12 fucking years. Not for 12 years while you continue to identify with it. It's like, oh yeah, it's okay for me to feel like, it's okay for me to think like this. But the whole time you're still secretly thinking like this. Not even secretly. We can all see it. It's not a secret. It's not a secret, okay? So I don't care that you can observe it. I don't care that you can name it. I don't care how self-aware you sound while you stay exactly where you are. Awareness that doesn't move you is just decoration. Observation without authorship is procrastination. You don't get credit for noticing the cage while refusing to step out of it. You don't get credit. You don't get credit for noticing the cage, noticing the prison while refusing to step out of it. If your identity still wobbles, when a thought appears or a feeling flares, then you do not know who you are yet. And no amount of commentary will save you. So the only question that matters is this. In all of this space, the only question that matters is this. It's not who you were. It's not what you feel. It's not what the character is doing today. Don't care. Could care less. Who the hell are you when all of that is stripped away? Who remains when the story collapses? When the emotions lose their drama, when the ego has nothing left to say? Because until that is settled, until that is stable, until that is your truth, every spiritual concept that you touch will become another hiding place. Everything will become another hiding place. Right? You are much bigger than these stories. But you have to recognize that. Okay? So, cool. I know I took a different tone in this message, right? I didn't want to take a coddling tone today because I thought that this message was needed, was overdue. And it seems to just be, I just kind of follow the pattern of how we're progressing in these lessons. And so this seemed to be something that was standing out, right? It was like, I've just seen so much calling out the ego or observing or whatever the case may be with no true embodiment afterwards. It's like, do you want therapy or do you want to change life? Both, Alex. Well, then go to therapy too. Then go to therapy too. But that's not why we're here, right? We're here because you deserve the shit that you want, right? Y'all deserve the things that you want. You want what you want, right? Cool. I know that you want the things that you want. And I want you to have the things that you want. Cool. I am that I am, no matter what. Love y'all. And she'll talk to y'all very, very soon. Peace.